the nation taking full advantage of what that opportunity, what the opportunity was for us. And what I mean by that is that I think, unfortunately, the debate and the public discourse surrounding the Sotomayor nomination frequently devolved into something less than informed and robust, intelligent debate. And what I mean by that is that all too often, partisans on both sides of the political aisle, I don't mean to lay the blame at the foot of either group, but I think partisans on both sides of the political issues fell back and just reverted back to the sort of standard playbook of either attacks against Justice Sotomayor, then Judge Sotomayor, or accolades to suggest that she should be confirmed. What we saw on the left was we saw politicians talking about her as a very compassionate but very mainstream, very moderate judge. We saw them trumpeting her inspirational life story, which certainly is inspirational, I think, really embodies the American dream in many respects. And then on the right, we saw folks really caricaturing Judge Sotomayor, calling her an ideologue, some even going further than that, calling her a racist, and even worse. So we really didn't see any opportunity for folks on either side of the aisle to talk with one another in an informed and intelligent manner. I think what we saw much more often was folks on both sides of the political aisle screaming past each other rather than engaging in debate. And I think that's unfortunate when all that the discussion of the court system involves is name-calling, mudslinging, and hyperbole. I think when we have the occasion of judges being nominated or being confirmed to the courts, it provides an important and a real opportunity for the public to consider what it is that judges and courts actually do within our constitutional system, and why that role is important, why that means something other than all of the other figures in the government. When the Senate is faced with a nominee from the president to name a judge to the Supreme Court or any of the other federal courts, it provides the nation with a moment to move beyond hollow accusations about judicial activism, hollow name-calling, and talk of legislation from the bench. And it gives us an opportunity to discuss what an impartial and independent judiciary means within our system of separated powers and what that means in people's daily lives. In my ideal world, the way I would like to see public discourse proceeding would be for the public to engage in a robust, meaningful debate about what judges do, what the role of the courts is in our society, and why that is important and unique within our system. And I think we all kind of innately understand the important role that judges play. And that stretches from the role that the courts play in the lives of ordinary, everyday people dealing with ordinary, everyday problems. You know, let's say you go on vacation, the pipes in your house freeze, the pipes in the basement freeze, your basement gets flooded, and you come back home and have to go to the insurance company and try and get them to pay for that. Well, if the insurance company balks and they say you're not covered, and you end up having to go to court to try and get reimbursed for all the damage to your home, you want to know that when you walk into that courtroom, you, as just an average, everyday American, and the insurance company, even if it's a big corporation, are playing on an even playing field. You want to know that nobody's got an advantage, there's no home field advantage for anybody in that courtroom, the judge isn't in cahoots with the insurance company. You want a fair shake. And Americans understand that. That's a basic principle of how fairness should operate in our system. It doesn't require you to have a big, complicated understanding of jurisprudential theory or anything. You go to court, you want a fair shake. And I think everyone understands that. I think a concept that is less understood, at least in everyday discourse, is the important role that the courts play in terms of our system of separated powers. And what I mean by that is to draw attention to the role that the judiciary plays with respect to the other political branches, which is to say with respect to the executive and legislative branches. Now bear in mind the judiciary is the only branch of our government that has the power to say that what the other branches are doing is illegal, violates the Constitution. In the federal courts, that can be the federal courts saying that the president acted unconstitutionally or that a law that Congress passed exceeded the powers the Constitution gives to Congress. Here at the state level, it can be the same principle with respect to actions by the government or by the state legislature. Now, the executive branch has the power to enforce the laws. They can investigate and prosecute people that break the law. The Congress, or the state legislature, has what they call the power of the purse, the ability to appropriate money to ensure that things are carried out consistent with the will of the legislative branch. The courts don't have that power. The courts can't enforce the law. The courts can't make the law. What the courts can do is declare what the law is. And in order to play that role in our system, without any power, any authority to go out and enforce what it is that the courts articulate as being the law, the courts need a solid reputation. The courts need a perception of integrity, a perception that courts interpret the law fairly, they see what the Constitution is, they ensure that the other branches act in conformity with the Constitution, and that they are not simply another arena in which different people on different sides of the partisan aisle carry out their political struggles. If the courts are just seen as just another place where the Democrats and the Republicans fight, and the courts are seen as just another continuation of the fights we see in the halls of Congress or in the State House, then they lack that reputation for integrity and impartiality. And I would submit that when the courts lose that reputation, their ability to do what they know is right, whether it's politically popular or whether it's against the majority idea, is lost. That ability of the courts is lost. And that, in our system, is a great tragedy. So to put it another way, the only authority the courts have is the integrity of their reputation. And if public confidence in the courts is eroded, they lose that reputation and they lose their power. Let me give a couple of examples to illustrate what I mean by that principle. Think back to 1954 when the United States Supreme Court encountered the issue of segregation of our school system. And in that year, the court heard the case of Brown versus Board of Education. I'm sure all of us in the room know it's probably one of the most famous, if not the most famous, cases that the Supreme Court has ever decided. Now, when they decided that a system of separate and equal education was illegal and violated the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution, that was a bold step forward. That was not a politically popular decision in a lot of the country. But in spite of the fact that folks throughout the South and the North as well resisted that decision, regardless of that fact, the court ultimately was seen as an institution with integrity and an institution that was above the political fray. And so in spite of the political difficulty in carrying out that mandate, President Eisenhower knew that what the court said had to be and went ahead and carried out that mandate. And I'd like to contrast the sort of prestige with which the U.S. Supreme Court was held in 1954 with the decision by a court in Indiana just last week. Some of you may have seen that last week the Intermediate Appellate Court in Indiana struck down that state's voter identification law. Indiana has among the most strict voter ID laws. You're forced to show a current and valid government-issued photo ID if you want to vote at the polling place in Indiana. And plaintiffs have challenged that policy in a number of different venues. In fact, it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. I believe it was last year or the year before. But they have continued, even after the Supreme Court weighed in on it, they've continued to fight that in state court in Indiana. Now, a unanimous panel of 3 judges declared that the Indiana voter ID law was invalid, and they struck it down. Immediately, the reaction to that was that this was a cynical partisan ploy by democratically appointed judges that were simply serving the wishes of the Democratic Party. The governor and a number of Republican politicians within the state immediately vowed to appeal that up to the Supreme Court of Indiana, which will have the final word on the issue. And it's widely expected that the Supreme Court will reinstate the law. Now, what's going on in Indiana, unfortunately, is a lot of name-calling about the judges on the court and a lot of cynicism about what is going on there. What's